The film opens with the image of a ship in space. Colonel George Taylor is at the controls. He's making a log entry about the journey so far. Although nearly 6 months out from Earth since they took off in 1972, they have traveled 700 years into the future due to their faster-than-light speed through a wormhole. Taylor takes an injection and enters his stasis chamber to wait out the rest of the voyage with his 3 fellow astronauts. As he sleeps, the ship continues before encountering a planet and crashes into a lake. The ship awakens the crew, who immediately realize their situation. One of the 4, a young woman, has died in stasis. Suddenly one of the bulkheads collapses and the ship begins to sink. The remaining 3 crewmen scramble to escape after being unsuccessful in sending a message to Earth. As Taylor leaves the ship, he sees the ship's clock showing the year as 3978. They have been in space for over 2,000 years, yet by traveling through a hyperspace wormhole they have aged only about 20 months, with long beards to prove it. The 3 men, Taylor, Landon, Dodge, take to a raft and begin paddling to shore. Taylor surmises that they are some 320 light-years from Earth on a planet orbiting a star in the Orion system. Landon calls him out on this information, claiming Taylor didn't have enough time to read the tapes before their ship sank. Coming ashore, they take stock of their situation. They have food and water for 3 days and a handgun. Taylor tells the others about the clock and the proof it offers about the theory of relativity. Landon stops to plant an American flag before moving off. They begin their journey in the rocky desert. Around them, unseen figures move across the cliff tops watching their progress. Slowly the country changes and stray vegetation is seen. Passing an outcrop, they see wooden crosses planted in the ground resembling a borderline fence. Evidence something intelligent lives on the planet. Passing the crosses, they see trees and can hear a waterfall. Realizing they may survive, they take all their clothes off and go for a swim in the lake. Further along on a muddy bank, they find footprints, which seem human. As they investigate, someone steals their clothes. The crew gives chase, catching fleeting glimpses of humanoids through the thick vegetation. Working their way to a clearing, they find a tribe of native men and women harvesting food from a tree. The humanoids freeze as a bizarre noise echoes over the area. The sound sends the tribe into a stampede. The crew become swept up in the human tide and become part of the rout. Ahead they hear horses and gunfire. The men change direction, realizing it is a trap, and they are being hunted by ape-like creatures riding on horses. Landon is knocked unconscious and captured. Dodge is shot and killed. The apes continue to herd the rest of the tribe into various traps, and Taylor is shot in the neck. As quickly as it began, the hunt ends. Dozens of humans have been captured, even more, killed and collected as trophies. At a clinic, ape surgeons remove the bullet from Taylor's neck and continue to treat him. Dr. Zira, a chimpanzee scientist, wants Taylor kept alive so that experiments on his brain can be conducted. Taylor wakes later to find himself in a cage. Zira visits to see how the captured humans are going. She has given him the nickname Bright Eyes. Taylor tries to communicate but can't speak because of his throat injury. Dr. Zayas, the orangutan minister for science, arrives at the lab to investigate the latest captured humans. Zira points out Bright Eyes to Zayas. Again Taylor fails to communicate. Zira is convinced of his intelligence, but Zayas is not and cautions Zira about her behavioral studies. Taylor discovers that the apes, who can talk, are in control and are divided into a strict caste system, the gorillas as police, military, hunters, and workers, the orangutans as administrators, politicians, lawyers, and religious clerics, and the chimpanzees as intellectuals and scientists. Humans, who are mute, are considered feral vermin and are hunted for sport and either killed outright, enslaved for manual labor, or used for scientific experimentation. Zira gives Taylor a human woman, Nova, and she is now assigned to his cage, hoping that she will mate with him. Days pass and Nova tries to bond with Taylor, but his moral code stops him. Zira, becoming more excited by Bright Eyes each day, invites her fiancé, Cornelius, to the clinic to see the progress she's made. At an outdoor confinement area near a large cage where the humans are kept, Zayas meets Cornelius, who is an archaeologist and planning another expedition into the so-called Forbidden Zone, the vast desert where Taylor and his crew marched overland from their crash site, to search of artifacts. During the conversation, Taylor attempts to communicate with them by writing a message in the dirt ground, but Nova innocently wipes the marks away. Then a fight between Taylor and another man breaks out. Taylor is removed by the gorilla guards to an isolated cage. Later, Zira gets close to Taylor's cage, and he grabs her notebook and pencil. Julius, the gorilla guard, enters the cage to beat up Taylor and retrieve the stolen items. Zira notices that Taylor has written a note that she understands. It says, "My name is Taylor." Stunned, she speaks to Taylor one-on-one, realizing he is intelligent. After taking Taylor out of his cage to her office, Zira tries to convince Cornelius of Taylor's origins. He refuses to believe that Taylor is no more than a hoax. Still mute because of his throat injury, Taylor points out a map where the ship went down and describes the journey the crew undertook by writing it down. Cornelius is even more disturbed that any creature could survive in the Forbidden Zone. Taylor takes an interest in Cornelius's work, and Zira explains in more detail that Cornelius's theory that the apes evolved from a lower form of life such as the humans. In the Forbidden Zone, Cornelius claims to have discovered artifacts that point to a civilization that predates the current ape society. Zaius arrives and interrupts the discussion and orders Taylor return to the compound. Later in his cage, Taylor overhears orders that he is to be gelded, castrated. As the guerrilla guards prepare him, he escapes into the ape village, first taking refuge in a church during a funeral. Discovered, he again escapes through a marketplace, then into a museum with various humans that have been stuffed and put on exhibition. There he finds the body of Dodge. Back in the marketplace, he is surrounded and subdued by apes. Suddenly Taylor discovers his voice has recovered, yells, "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty apes." Back at the medical compound, Nova is removed from Taylor's cage. With his throat completely healed and able to speak again, Taylor reflects on the humor that for the first time he needs someone and she has taken away. Over the next few days, Taylor, now alone in his cage, muses about Earth and the life left behind. One day, a group of apes comes in where they collar and restrain Taylor before taking him via a horse-drawn wagon to a large building in the middle of the so-called Ape City, which Taylor reads from its name as the National Ministry. In a large assembly hall, Taylor is seated at the table where Cornelius and Zira are also seated. It soon becomes apparent to Taylor, and the viewers, that this hearing is a trial to decide Taylor's origin and fate. 3 orangutans are the judges of the case. They are the president of the ministry, Dr. Maximus, and Dr. Zaius. Zira and Cornelius have been appointed by the panel of judges to defend him. Taylor tries to speak and is immediately restrained from doing so by the president of the ministry, who tells Taylor that under ape law, humans have no rights. A speech is given by Dr. Maximus defending the first article of faith that only apes should study apes. Dr. Zaius is called to testify, where he argues before the court, claiming that since Taylor was operated on his throat for his bullet injury, that Dr. Zira programmed his vocal cords so he could appear to speak. Dr. Honorius, the orangutan prosecutor, challenges Taylor to explain the second article of faith and why humans have no soul. Taylor states he cannot because he does not know the ape society or rules. Taylor then asks Cornelius to read a statement to the tribunal for him. But the tribunal refuses to allow the document to be entered into evidence since it was written by a human. Taylor claims there were other talking humans when they arrived. The tribunal adjourns to inspect the survivors of the hunt. A little later, Taylor is led outside where his collar and restraints are removed and he is allowed to mingle with the group of captured humans that had survived the hunt. Taylor recognizes Landon in the group. He goes to talk to Landon, only to discover a large scar on the side of his head. Taylor realizes that Landon has had most of his brain removed. Taylor physically attacks Zaius for performing a crude lobotomy on his friend, but is restrained before he can do any harm. The tribunal resumes where Dr. Zaius is recalled to testify, claiming that the human, Landon, which Taylor pointed out suffered a head injury due to being shot and never could talk. Taylor disrupts the testimony by calling Zaius a liar, but he is again restrained and gagged by the guerrilla guards standing beside him. Cornelius steps in and concedes that Taylor could not have come from outer space, but he came from somewhere such as the past. Cornelius goes on to tell how accurately Taylor described the Forbidden Zone to them, and Cornelius's research shows a civilization predating the apes that lived out there as well. The biased orangutan tribunal rejects the theory and counters by charging both Zira and Cornelius with contempt of court and heresy. The court adjourns to consider their fate as well as the fate of Taylor. Afterward, Dr. Zaius takes Taylor to his private chambers and explains what Taylor's fate will be unless he cooperates. He challenges Taylor to admit where he came from, but Taylor stands firm, claiming to have come from a distant planet where humans are the dominant species. Zaius then admits that he knew Landon could talk, and intentionally had a lobotomy performed on him to prevent him from talking and keeping the knowledge of intelligent humans suppressed from the ape public. Zaius tells Taylor that he believes that Taylor and his tribe originated from the other side of the Forbidden Zone and worries about what they might do in the future. Zaius again tries to make Taylor admit that he comes from a tribe of intelligent humans, but Taylor continues to maintain that he comes from a distant planet in the past. Realizing that Taylor won't budge, Zaius orders the gorilla guards to send Taylor back to the clinical compound. Later, a chimpanzee attendant, who is Zira's socially rebellious nephew Lucius, arrives at the compound to explain to the gorilla guard, Julius, that Taylor is being transferred to the zoo. Julius becomes suspicious and Lucius, with the help of Taylor, subdues him and escapes. Taylor insists on Nova coming on the escape. Taylor and Lucius meet up with Zira, who disguises Taylor and takes them across the country in a horse-drawn wagon. Later, Cornelius meets up with them bearing fresh horses and supplies. To escape, Cornelius is going to lead the party back into the Forbidden Zone desert to where he found the artifacts a year before. He tells Taylor that only his discovery of the artifacts will prove Zira and him innocent of the heresy charges. They travel across the desert and reach the dig site at a cave overlooking a beach facing a vast ocean. Taylor examines the artifacts that Cornelius has discovered. As they do so, Zaius and a group of guerrilla soldiers arrive and a brief firefight develops before a truce is called by Zaius, under threat of being shot by Taylor. He then tries to negotiate with Cornelius for him to retract his findings and says Cornelius will get off lightly. Ultimately, Taylor negotiates with Zaius that if Cornelius can prove his theory, Zaius will let him off his charges. Zaius agrees, and they enter the cave. Cornelius shows the diggings and explains that the deeper they dig, the more advanced the culture seems to be. Zaius brushes off Cornelius's argument as primitive and undeveloped. Finally, Cornelius shows Zaius a human doll. Zaius does not understand the significance of the doll and dismisses it. Taylor looks over the other items and identifies what they were. Again, Zaius refuses to believe the evidence. Finally, Nova presses a button on the doll, and it speaks. Taylor challenges him as to why apes would make a human doll that talks. Outside the cave, the firefight erupts again. Lucius is overpowered and captured, but Taylor manages to kill and/or wound a number of the guerrilla soldiers before faking an injury to draw Zaius out of the cave. Zaius is trapped, and he is forced again to order his soldiers to retreat. Taylor tells the guerrillas he wants food, a horse, and ammunition, and he will let Zaius go free. Taylor challenges the captive Zaius that he knew about the older civilization of humans and covered it up. Zaius admits he did know about it from the ancient writings. Zaius has Cornelius read aloud one of the scrolls that he keeps with him at all times. The sacred scroll written by apes many years earlier is as Cornelius reads. Beware the beast man, for he is the devil's pawn. Alone among God's primates, he kills for sport or lust or greed. Yea, he will murder his brother to possess his brother's land. Let him not breed in great numbers, for he will make a desert of his home and yours. Shun him, for he is the harbinger of death. According to Zaius, the writings of the scrolls give a dire warning about the man and the danger he presents. Zaius argues that nothing Taylor has done proves the writings wrong. Zaius then admits that he always knew that an intelligent human like Taylor would show up sooner or later. When Taylor asks Zaius why he hates humans so much that he believes that all humans must be killed to a point of extinction, Zaius replies that he doesn't hate humans, but he fears humans. Not for what they are, but for what they were. Zaius claims that man's high intelligence mixed with his need for war. To destroy. Zaius explains that the Forbidden Zone was once a paradise, but it was destroyed by the man many hundreds of years ago. When Lucius is released and arrives with the horse and supplies, Taylor continues to argue with Zaius that he is going deeper into the Forbidden Zone to try and understand what happened. To find out how or what brought the previous culture to an end. Zaius warns Taylor that he might not like what he finds out there. Taylor says his goodbyes to Cornelius and Zira and rides on his horse off along the shore with Nova. After Taylor rides off, the guerrilla soldiers appear and release Zaius, but he tells them not to chase after Taylor. He instead orders the cave to be destroyed and sealed, and orders his guerrillas to arrest Cornelius, Zira, and Lucius, telling the three chimpanzees that he will take them back to Ape City and they will stand trial for heresy after all. Zaius states that he and the ruling ministry will continue to cover up the true origins of humanity. When Zira asks Zaius about what Taylor might find out there in the Forbidden Zone, Zaius replies, his destiny. After riding a distance, Taylor catches sight of something sticking out of the sand on the beach. Overcome with grief, he dismounts from his horse and falls to his knees in the sand of the surf, screaming to the sky. The camera pans out to show the Statue of Liberty half buried in the sand in a highly corroded state. He understands now that he has been on Earth the whole time, and Zaius was right. Humanity did destroy itself and apes became the dominant species. Maniacs. You finally blew it all up. Taylor screams in despair. God damn you all to hell. To watch more video like this, click on the videos on your screen, and don't forget to let me know how you feel about today's video in the comments down below. And at last I will say stay safe and stay healthy. See you next videos.